Morning, everybody. Morning. How y'all doing this morning? Great. Good to see you, friends. We pay attention to signs and we rely on them. If I'm driving down the highway, I want to see that sign that tells me where to exit. When I go in a hospital, I want to see the sign that tells me which is the elevator to take to get to the right floor. I rely on those signs, you do too. But what I really delight in are not the kinds of functional signs. I delight in signs like this. Whatever you do today, do it with the confidence of a 4-year-old. It reminds me of a little boy who used to go to the Altus Chapel, and he would compare his cape with the Catholic priest's cape. I like this sign too. I think it's a little snarky. I wonder about the person who put this together. Or this one is obviously fictitious, but it's still funny. Another snarky sign. Pretend it's 1995. You need to talk to each other. And I like this one. 2 messages. Howard Thurman, who was an intellectual, wrote 20 different books, was a minister, a theologian, an educator, taught at Howard University and Boston University, a leader of the civil rights movement in many ways. He influenced Martin Luther King Jr. He had gone to school with Martin Luther King Sr. He had met with Muhammad Gandhi. And he talks about riding on a train and coming into Texas. And he said the train stopped in Big Sandy on the railroad tracks there. And he said, I looked out and I saw this huge sign. It's 20 feet high, 20 feet wide. And he said, it said on that sign, 5 highways meet here, 4 chances to go wrong. Ask us. That's kind of a metaphor of life in a way, isn't it? There's a lot of ways to go wrong. The author of John wrote his book, the Gospel of John, using the metaphor of signs. And signs were a little different message than the word miracles, even though when you look at the Gospel, you're thinking these are miracles. Because John is writing his Gospel different than Matthew, Mark, or Luke. Matthew, when he wrote his gospel, was writing to a Jewish audience, so he used a long Jewish genealogy. You notice John doesn't have that. It wouldn't click with his audience. When Matthew put his gospel together, he told the Jesus story like it paralleled the life of Moses. Just like Moses was in Egypt, Jesus as a child goes into Egypt. Just like Moses was born into a circumstance where a terrible ruler wanted to kill infants, so Pharaoh, so was Herod up to that kind of thing. Just like Moses was a lawgiver, he presents Jesus as like a new lawgiver. But John presents a different kind of Jesus story. And his Jesus story includes something that resonates with people with more of a Greek way of thinking. He's writing, I think, to 2nd or 3rd generation Christians. And so he uses some concepts that are a little different. The Greeks thought of 2 worlds. They thought of this world that we live in, wonderful in a lot of ways, but kind of flawed and imperfect and shadows of what the real perfect world was like. And then they said that there was this perfect pattern of the good and the beautiful, which of all earthly copies are just imperfect perceptions. And William Barclay puts it this way: the great problem was how to get into this world of reality, how to get out of our shadows into the eternal truths. And what John says is that's what Jesus enables us to do. He enables us to glimpse into the ultimate reality. And Jesus is like the real light. He's the real bread. He's the real vine. And just as kind of a reminder of And so he's the window which lets us see what's real. And just kind of a a reminder of what the gospel has in it. It has some major signs in it, and these are on this slide right now. It also has a lot of other little signs that come up as you read through the gospel. Even if you just peruse it and kind of read it quickly, you'll see a lot of other occasions that are like signs that are giving us a glimpse into reality. And then also, those signs are accompanied by I am statements, like I'm the bread of life, or I'm the light of the world, or I'm the gate, I'm the good shepherd, and I'm the resurrection and life is the focus in today's text, or I am the way, the truth, and the life, or I'm the true vine. One that I don't have on there that I think is that really stands out in some ways is out of John 8:58. I tell you for certain that even before Abraham was, I was, and I am. It's a claim about his uniqueness. But let's go to the story. I think this is a story about friendship, about unmet expectations, about deep disappointment. It's a story about crisis. It's a story about confrontation and honesty and struggles to maintain our confidence in Jesus. And then it's a story about assurance and the impossible becoming possible. Let's take a look at this story first. Think about the friendship. We can't help but come to this story with an awareness of another situation where Jesus has gone to Bethany and spent time with this family, Lazarus and Martha and Mary. And picture just, if you can, try to imagine Jesus relaxing in their home, sharing a meal with them, the close conversations they would have had, the affirmation, the listening to them, to really, that he was really in tune with them. The friendship that they shared is what strikes us as we start this story. It's embedded in the message that Martha will send to Jesus. And the point when the story opens, Jesus is not there, he's away. And then the crisis happens. Everything changes. Lazarus is sick like he's never been sick before. And as we start this story, let's focus on Martha. What do you think Martha's first response would have been? I think Martha is a take action kind of person. So she would have gotten whatever he needed. She would get him fluids to drink. She would have gotten the blankets if he needed them. She would call on somebody to help her if she could find somebody that knew more to what to do for Lazarus than she did. She would have used any remedies that she could access. But no matter what she did, he wasn't getting better. And she becomes frantic and she's trying to think, what can I do to help Lazarus, my brother? And then it comes to her, it's kind of like an aha moment. I am going to call on the person that I know that has the closest connection to God. And so she calls on Jesus, right? But she can't go personally because she needs to stay there and take care of him. So, and Mary can't go because she needs Mary to be helping her. So they call on a messenger to send. And she says, you don't need to tell Jesus what to do. He'll know what to do. Just tell him Lazarus, whom you're really close to, is terribly sick. What do you think her expectations were? I'm thinking her expectations were that Jesus would love Lazarus, that he loved Lazarus, that he would do something about it, that everything was going to be okay. And there she's waiting as the messenger's gone. She's waiting for something to change. She knows he doesn't need to come. She's seen him act in long distance before, but nothing's changed yet. And so she's getting frustrated, sort of like some people at a traffic light. There was a guy who wrote a book. He said we ought to have a new kind of time frame that's called a honkosecond. What's a honkosecond? It's the time that the light turns green till the guy behind you honks at you to get moving. So she's in that kind of moment. She's frustrated. She's wanting something to happen. And then the messenger comes back. And the messenger, she asks me, well, did you find him? What did he say? Well, maybe the messenger told her. Maybe the messenger heard what Jesus said to the disciples, that he's going to be okay, basically, right? This is going to bring glory to God. It's going to bring glory to the Son of God. So Martha's thinking, hey, this is going to turn out all right. But then she watches her brother, and she watches him go downhill. And she can't understand Jesus' words where he says, this won't end in death. It sure looks like it's going to end in death to me. She sees her brother as he's gasping for breath, that every movement's a struggle. The eyes that were vibrant are now in a distant gaze, and she doesn't understand Jesus at all. What does he mean that this won't end in death? My brother's going downhill. And the word disappointment doesn't begin to describe her feelings. She really expected that something was going to happen for her brother. And she's wondering, if Lazarus dies, how does that bring glory to God and show the glory of his Son? She doesn't get it. What's that supposed to mean? And she's beside herself, knowing that Jesus had the ability to do something about it. What kind of friend just blows it off and doesn't respond when a friend needs help? She's struggling with that. And the worst happens. Lazarus has struggled long enough, and his body can't take it anymore. His heart's too weak, his vital organs shut down, and he dies. And her heart is broken. Memories flood her mind. Her brothers meant everything to her. What do you imagine she would have said if you asked her, what did Lazarus mean to you? What memories come to mind? What descriptions would she have said? He always had the right words to say. He was a source of strength. He was balanced. He made us smile. He enjoyed life to the full. He was insightful. He was caring and helpful, good to others. He was the kind of person people loved to be around. And the descriptions would have gone on about what kind of memory she had about Lazarus and how much he meant to her. And she is devastated. Her world has just collapsed, and now she has to make arrangements, because in her tradition, the body needed to be buried soon. And no doubt people in the community came to help her. And so they got the body wrapped, and they placed it in a little cave, and they rolled a rock in front of it. Finally, way too late to change anything about the outcome, Jesus shows up. Now, Lazarus has been buried 4 days at this point. And Martha sees him before he gets to the house, and she goes out to greet him. Can you imagine what that conversation might have been like for her? How awkward it would be, how tough it would be to talk to Jesus. What do you think she's saying to him? Why, Jesus? Why didn't you do anything? I had every confidence in you, and you did nothing. I thought you loved Lazarus as much as we did. But you have a funny way of showing it, don't you? I don't know what to think of you. And she didn't hold back. She let it all come out. Her hurt, her anger, her feelings of betrayal, her frustration with this special friend. You know, just like I do, Jesus, you could have saved him. So why did you wait so long to come? And not only And we'll see that Mary responds the same way. And not only Mary and Martha feel this way, but you heard it read in verse 37 today. The friends that were at the home with Mary, when they come out and said, isn't this the one who healed the blind man? Couldn't he have saved Lazarus? It's like all the comments or attacks on Jesus. But let us pause here for a second. What do you notice about Jesus in this story? He doesn't say anything to Lazarus, to Mary, or to Martha, or to her friends that are defensive, that are sort of like, now wait 1 minute, you're out of line. He doesn't tell them that you have no right to criticize me. He just sits there with them in their pain and their agony, and he hangs in there with them. And I think as we think of his response, it's sort of like, to me, it's sort of like the story saying, you can be honest with me. Jesus saying, you can be honest with me. Whatever you say, I'm not going to turn my back on you. I'm waiting for you to learn to trust me, but until then, you're still mine. And in this story, don't we get a picture of how we can be honest with God? Are you disappointed? Are you angry? Have you ever been at that point where you're ready to give up on God? The point of the story is God will never give up on you. Never. Aren't we a lot like Jesus' critics? We say, you should have and you could have. You should have done something different, God. And I don't know about you, but I wrestle with why questions all the time. I think about the terrible things that happen, the natural disasters, the oppression, the persecution, the violence, the terminal illnesses that happen all too frequently, and the answers are so incomplete, and we struggle with these questions for years. Why does God sit back and let terrible things happen? Why is this life such a crapshoot when it comes to health? Why didn't you answer my prayers and heal my husband, my wife, my son, my daughter, my father, my mother? And we say, God, you should have, and you could have. But in the final analysis, we're called, just like Martha, to trust in Jesus, to trust in God. Isaiah hinted at this need to be trusting of the mystery of God when he said, your ways are not our ways. Paul said it when he said, who can understand his decisions or explain what he does? And now Martha says something to Jesus, even after she said all her frustration. She says something that indicates that she has not given up hope. She says to him, but even now, I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Now, you and I know that's not something you would say to just anyone, unless there is something totally unique about this person whom you're talking to. What do you think? Do you think he's the totally unique one? Years ago, I heard a sermon in Tacoma, Washington, at a little church there that used fans in the summertime. And the sermon's title was, If Unique is What You Seek. Now, I can't remember any sermon titles. So why could I remember that sermon title? Because at the time, there was a slogan in a beer ad for Tuborg beer that said, if unique is what you seek. And this minister took that ad and he said, Jesus is the one that's really the unique one. If unique is what you seek, look at Jesus. And the author of this gospel is over and over again saying that's what we see in Jesus. He's the one that is unique. It's like he's parading witnesses out onto the stage for us. In the first chapter, it goes quick, and John says, this is the Lamb of God. And after John says that, Philip says it, and Nathanael says it. They're all saying there's something unique about this one. And then the second chapter, he's at a wedding, and his mother says, he is unique. There's something he can do about this wine problem today. And after that, he sees an authority figure who's got a son that's dying. And he heals that son. He's at the Passover feast, and people who see his signs and hear his words say, he's the unique one. In the third chapter, a ruler named Nicodemus comes to him and says, we know. What do you know, Nicodemus? We know that you are a teacher that's come from God. We know you're unique. There's something different about you, Jesus. In the fourth chapter, he meets a Samaritan woman at a well, and it isn't a very long conversation before she concludes, he is unique. He's different. And she goes to tell everybody else in the community, and they also say the same thing. And it says, many came to believe in Jesus. And we could go on and on in the Gospel of John, but that's what John is doing in this Gospel. He's presenting Jesus as the unique one. Of course, that fits in with the theme that we have during these weeks that lead up to Easter. When we come to Easter Sunday, what we're celebrating is the unique one that God sent into this world, the sign of something better. And Jesus then tells Martha, we come back to Martha, and he's saying, there's going to be a resurrection. And she said, well, yeah, I know there's going to be a resurrection. There's going to be a resurrection. He's really saying to her, there's going to be a resurrection today. And he asked her, do you believe? And one of the greatest statements in the Gospels, Martha says, she says, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God. You're the one we hoped would come into the world. That's on a par with what is in the Gospel of John when they say, you're the Holy One of God. Or when Peter says at Caesarea Philippi, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. That's what Martha's just declared. And then as soon as that conversation at that point stops for a second, Martha gets up and she goes to get Mary. Why does she go to get Mary? I think now because her hope is renewed. Don't you? She's saying, my sister Mary needs to know that Lazarus, that something's going to happen today. And so she runs to get Mary, and Mary comes, and it's a pitiful scene. Mary is falling at Jesus' feet. She's weeping. She hasn't had a clue about this conversation. She's lost all hope. And the folks follow her out. And Jesus' heart is touched. Shortest verse of the Bible, favorite for kids to memorize. You got to memorize a verse in the Bible. Jesus wept. The verse has all kinds of deep pathos in it. It's his compassion for those who are hurting so much. And isn't that something else we love about Jesus? The compassion, the empathy he has for the pain that we go through. It's a reflection. Again, it's a sign into heaven. It's a reflection of the heart of God. And then he's still shook, and he says, lead me to where Lazarus is buried. And Martha cautions him when he says to roll that stone back. She said, it's not going to be pretty, Jesus. He's been in there 4 days. His body's decaying. You don't want to do that. Oh, yes, I do, Martha. We're going to open this thing. And then he prays. And he prays and he says, God, I know you listen to me, but I want these folks around me to know that you listen. And that you're a God that is there for us. And then he calls out for the impossible to happen. He calls out for Lazarus to come alive again. Can you imagine what that would have been like for those that were there that day? Imagine what it was like for Martha and Mary. The tears that were tears of grief are near tears of joy. They're stunned. Here he is still in his burial cloth, but he's walking out of the grave. When I was preparing this sermon, I thought about a song that came out in the 80s by this Christian, I'll call him a rock singer, named Carmen. Lazarus, come forth. I don't know if some of you folks that are my age can remember that song. It was a dramatic song. Look it up on YouTube. Look up Carmen and Lazarus and you'll find the song. It's tremendous. He's trying to picture there, Lazarus is having this conversation with Elijah and Moses and all these other folks, and all of a sudden he starts hearing his name, calling him out of the grave. I wish I could dramatize this better. But it's a moment of unbelievability, right? It's a moment of great joy. There's some, when they hear this story, say, no way. No way. How can a person who's been dead for 4 days come back alive? There's others of us that are sitting here today that say, yes way. And in early Christianity, this is the picture on the right is a portrayal of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead, dating to the 3rd century. In early Christianity, this was a common motif in Christian art because it was their hope. Obviously, when the author of the Gospel of John told this story, he didn't think he was just telling a story. He was telling us a reality that we have hope beyond this life. What are the implications of this story for us today as we strive to realign our lives with Christ's vision? Maybe it's about knowing that the guide is not absent, that it's reasonable to hold on to hope when all hope is lost. Maybe it's a call to trust in a God that seems too silent at times, who is nevertheless still there for us and calls us to trust no matter what. Or maybe the story is about our enemy death and Christ's victory over death and why we still have hope. But maybe more than anything else, this story is calling us to stand in awe of the one who came to this world to give us a glimpse of what is real. I pray that your hearts are drawn to him, that you want to walk closer with him as I do. May we all give our hearts deeper to God in trust and faith. Now will the praise team come back forward? The lesson is yours.